In this video, we will learn how to use exception handling in Python. So first of all, what are exceptions? So an exception is an event which occurs during the execution of a program that disrupts the normal flow of the program. So basically, exception is an unexpected event which disrupts the normal flow of the program. So let me show you some examples of exceptions which may occur during the execution of a program. So let's say we have a number and we divide this number by 0, and when we press enter, it's going to give us this exception which says 0 division error. So this 0 division error is an exception when you divide anything by 0 in Python. Let me show you some more examples. So let's say I want to add a number and a string. Let's say 10 plus 10, but this 10 is an integer and this 10 is a string. And when I run the command, it says type error, unsupported operand types for int and string. So we cannot add a number and a string in Python. So this type error is another kind of exception. Let's say I'm going to just use a variable name ABC which I haven't declared till now, and when I press enter, it's going to once again give me this exception which says name error. Name ABC is not defined, which is true because we haven't defined the name ABC, but we are calling this variable which we haven't defined, so we get this exception which says name error. Next, let me define a variable, and I'm going to assign some tuple values here, 1 and 2. And now what I want to do is I want to call some methods. So you can see some methods are available for this tuple. Now let's call some random method using this tuple variable. It will give us an error which says attribute error. Tuple object has no attribute, whatever attribute I have provided here. So this attribute is not present in the tuple object. Also, when you call our method, let me call some other method which is not there, and once again when I press enter, once again I get this error which says attribute error because this function is not present in the tuple object. So these are all exceptions in Python. Attribute error or name error or type error or 0 division error, all are exceptions in Python. Now if you want to see more exceptions, you can use the help inbuilt method, and then you can write built-ins and then press enter. It gives me the name error once again because I need to first of all import this built-in module. So import built-ins, and I'm going to once again use help and inside the parenthesis built-in and then press enter, which is going to give me this kind of output. And when I go at the top of this output, so let me just scroll at the top, and here you will see under the classes there is an object class, and under the object class there is a base exception class, and under the base exception comes the exception class, and under the exception there is a big list of exceptions which you can see here. So 0 division error we have already seen, or when you scroll down, name error we have already seen. So all the exceptions which Python may throw are all listed here. So if you want to see the list of all the exceptions, you can just give this method which is help built-in, but before that you need to import this built-in module, and then it's going to show you this kind of output, and you will also be able to see all these exceptions in Python. Now let me show you a real life example of exceptions in Python. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define some variables here. So first variable is result, and I'm going to initialize it with the value none, and then I'm going to declare two variables. Let's say a, which takes an input, and we want to ask the user to provide some numbers. So let's say number 1 using the variable a, and in the same way I'm going to declare a variable b which also asks the user to provide a second number, but you already know that this input will return the string, so we can just convert this string into a float, let's say. So I'm going to just cast the output of this input string to a float value, and then what I want to do is I want to save the division of the two numbers a and b into the result. So a divided by b, I want to save it into the result, and then at last I would just want to print the value of the result. Now let's run this program. So right click, run the file name, and then let me provide some numbers here. So 5 and 6, and press enter. It's going to give me the result, which is the division of these two numbers. Let me run the program once again, and this time I will provide 10, and the second number is equal to 0 here, and we know that when we divide some number by 0, we get this exception which says 0 division error. And you will also observe that as soon as this error is thrown, so this error comes from this line 5. So when you click on this line, it shows us that this error is coming from this line, which is the division of these two numbers. And as soon as this exception occurs, all the code which we want to execute after that will not be executed. So we were printing this result here, but it's not printed. Let me print something else here. So I'm going to just say end, and once again I'm going to run the program, and I'm going to provide the same inputs here, and you can see neither this statement is printed nor the end is printed. So whenever an exception occurs, Python stops whatever it is doing. So in our case, whenever this exception is thrown at this line, both these statements will not be executed. And why these two lines of code will not be executed? Because we haven't handled this exception. So Python allows us to handle the exception, which we are not doing right now. That's why it stops everything whenever this exception occurs. So how to handle these type of exceptions? So you can handle these type of exceptions using a try except keyword. So just write try, and then under the try you write whatever you want to test, and then you write except keyword here. So just write except, and then under the except you write some code which you perform when the exception is thrown. So I'm going to just say this error, which is float division error. Okay, so this is what I'm going to print, and don't forget to put colon in front of except and try. So let me run the code, and let me give the same condition. So 10 and second is 0, and this time you will see that this exception is not thrown, and the result is also printed, and the end line is also printed, you can see here. And also this line is executed, which comes from the except statement which says float division error. So whenever you use try except notation, first of all your code under the try will be evaluated, and if it throws some exception, then whatever code you write under the except will be executed, and then all the other statements will be executed, whatever comes after this try except code. So this time no error is thrown, and we have handled this error, and you can see clearly it says that float division by 0, which means it comes to the except condition. So now we are handling this error, which is 0 division error. Now in other condition, when this error is not thrown, so we will just give some valid value 10 and 5, so no 0 division error will be thrown, and when I press enter, you will see that result will be printed and end will be printed by these two lines, but no except statement will be printed. So this statement is not executed because this code has not thrown any error, because there is no error occurred. Now as I have shown you that all the exceptions are under exception class. So we can also write here exception, and then we can just write this notation exception as E, and this will show us more details of the error. Okay, so I'm going to just write here error is equal to, and then I'm going to just print whatever the content of E is. And once again, when I run the code, and I will give the number with the 0 here, and you will see it prints this error which says float division by 0. So this is printed using this E keyword, which shows us the correct error. I have also shown you that this exception is the base class of zero division error. So for example, when I will try to know the type of this error E, and when I run the code once again, and let me provide this input once again, you will see that this error is of type zero division error. So we know that this exception is thrown from this class. So instead of writing this generic exception class, we can also use this zero division error here. And now whenever this specific error is thrown, then only this will be printed here. So let me run the code once again, and let me give this input here, and you will see once again this line of code is printed using this statement, and that means zero division error is caught by this line of code, and then the statement under that is printed. Now let's say this line of code throws some other kind of error other than zero division error. So let me just remove this typecasting of float here. That means it's going to throw us some other kind of error which is not zero division error. And let me run the code now, and I will provide two numbers here once again, and you will see that now this error is different, which is type error, which says unsupported type, string and float. So why is this happening? We are catching the exception using this except keyword, but we are only catching the zero division exception. We are not catching the type error exception. That's why our program is stopped and these two lines of code is not executed. So you need to either use the base class of the exception, which is this one, exception, and when you run the code and when you write these input, it will be handled, and you can see this time type error is caught. It's not a zero division error, but the type error which comes because the type which we have provided here is string, and we are dividing string by a float value which throws this error. So if you want to catch all the exceptions, you use this base class, but it's not a good practice. You need to have information about your exceptions. So I'm going to once again write this zero exception error here. And what I can do more here is I can add one more except statement here, and this time instead of zero division error, I can say catch also type error. Okay, so I'm going to just write type error and here zero division error, so we know from where this error is coming. And when I run the code once again, and when I give the inputs, you will see that this error is coming from this line of code. So this except statement is catching your exception, which is type error. Now when I just add this typecast of float once again, and when I run the code once again, and when I provide 10 and 0 once again, you will see this error is caught by the other except statement, which is this statement, which is used to catch the zero division error. So you can also provide multiple except statement in order to catch multiple exceptions in Python. So this is how you can do exception handling in Python. We'll talk about else and finally statement with this try except statement. So I will be using the same code which I have now. To start with, at the end of this try except statement, we can also use the else statement. So you can just write else, and for now I will just print here, for example, underscore underscore else underscore underscore. And also we can use a keyword called finally with our try except statement. And here also I'm going to just print underscore underscore finally underscore underscore. So what does this else and finally statement do? Let's see by running our program. So I'm going to run the program, and now I'm going to give some valid input so that our program will not throw any error. So I'm going to just divide 10 by 5 and then press enter, and you will see what is printed here. So first of all, else is printed, then finally is printed, and then the result is printed using this print statement, and then at the end this and string is printed. So in this scenario there was no exception thrown by the code. That's why none of these exception statements are printed. So you can use else statement whenever your code does not throw any exception. So whenever your code doesn't throw any exception, else statement will be executed. But when this finally statement is executed, so let me give you one more scenario and then we will discuss about the finally statement. And this time I'm going to intentionally write 0 here, which is going to throw the exception, and I'm going to press enter, and you can see 0 division error is thrown, which is caught here, and this statement is printed first, and then this finally keyword is printed using this statement, and at the end these two lines of code are executed. So once again, let's talk about the else statement. You can see whenever your code throws an exception, then this else statement will not be executed. The else statement will only be executed whenever your code doesn't throw any exception. But what's with finally statement? So we have seen in the case of exception, this finally is printed, and in the case of no exception also, this finally is printed. So this finally statement is guaranteed to be executed whether exception occurs or does not occurs. So the only code which is guaranteed to be executed in all these lines is the finally statement. Finally statement is always executed whether your code throws any error or it doesn't throw any error. Now, in which cases you might want to use this finally statement? So sometimes whenever you use files, you need to close these files after opening them. Whether the exception occurs or not, it is mandatory to close your files. And in those cases, you can use this finally statement. The next example is, for example, you are using any database and you are opening that database, right? And for some reason, your connection is lost with your database, then the exception is thrown, and in the finally statement, you can reconnect to your database using the reconnect code of the database. So in finally statement, you would want to execute that code which you think that have to be executed whether error happens or does not happens. So in all those scenarios, you can use the finally statement. Now the next question arises is whether we can use this else and the finally statement without the except statement. The answer is, you can already see here, no. So you cannot use this else statement without the except statement. So you have to use except in order to use this else statement. But when I remove the except and the else statements, you can see there is no error now. So you can use the try and finally without the use of except or the else statement, because the code under finally will always be executed whether your code throws any error or not. So it's independent of this except statement or the else statement. So